Greetings. Our text at this moment would be from Jeremiah 29, verse 11. And it says, "For I know the thoughts that I think towards you, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope." And the title I'd like us to consider would be, "Why do we limit God?" A few years ago, actually, let me say a number of years ago, I went to church with a little cousin of mine. I think she was about 3-4 years old. And as we were sitting in church, a friend of mine walked through the door, and she was on crutches. So as we were paying attention to the Sabbath school program, my cousin then asks me a question, and she says, "What happened to her?" So my friend had been involved in an accident, and her leg had been amputated, so she was on crutches because of that. And I tried to explain to my cousin that her leg got cut because she was involved in an accident. This seemed to settle well for that moment with her. A few minutes later, she nudges me and she asks me, "So what cut her leg?" And I realized this story was not going to finish. So I explained to her, no, when she was involved in the accident, 2 cars bumped each other, and that's how she got damaged and had to get her leg cut off. She accepted it for a short while, and a little later on, she nudges me again and she says, "So what is it that cut her? Was it glass? Was it a knife?" And I tried to explain that, when the 2 cars collided, the metal in there caused her leg to be damaged, and they had to cut it off. And still, this was not settling too well with her. So in her mind, what could cut was only a knife or glass. And I realized that I couldn't get out of this issue if I don't explain it to her in a way that she understands. So I did explain to her, and I told her that it was the glass that was there in the cars that cut her leg. And after that, she asked me no questions. But after that encounter, it dawned to my head that oftentimes we do this to God. So a lot of things happen in our lives, and sometimes we can't explain them. And when we go to God and He gives us the answers that are correct, we don't accept them, because all we understand are glass and knives. So if it's not a glass or a knife that can cut, it can't be anything else. And oftentimes what we then force God to do is to water down what He wants us to understand, such that we are satisfied with our answers. And hence we limit God. The pen of inspiration says God has 1,000, or rather more than 1,000 ways to provide for us that we know nothing about. And can you imagine how many times when we pray, we ask God for specific things in specific ways, and if they don't come in such ways, we think He hasn't answered. And oftentimes, until we get what we want, we feel that God is not hearing us, when He actually has greater things in store for us. So as my little cousin couldn't understand, and I couldn't even explain tendons and muscles to her, which would have made her more knowledgeable. But because she understood glass and knives, that's where I would needed to water down this thing too. Let us not do that to God. He wants us and to raise us up to something that is beyond what we can ask or imagine or even think. A lot of times we actually read the verse wrong, because it says, "I know the thoughts I have towards you." And many times we want to make our own thoughts the plans that God has for us. So we don't want to allow Him to have His thoughts manifested in us. It reminds me of a verse in Isaiah chapter 55, verse 8 and 9, and it says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so are my ways higher than yours, and my thoughts above yours." I pray that we allow God and His thoughts to be of essence and of ruling in our lives, Because when we want to box him and place him where we want or where it makes sense to us, we actually limit what he can do in our lives. May God bless you.